So I am, in case you couldn't tell from previous videos, a really big fan of these plastic cutting mats. I just bought a new one just for sort of testing, but also for general use and miscellaneous activity from company's called Dahle, and this is the Vantage line. It's called a cutting mat or self-healing cutting mat. And this is a 12 by 9 inch. Obviously under here I have a much larger one, but they're all pretty much the same as long as you go with a major brand. I've never really talked about it, but I figured this would be a good excuse to do it. Here's the literature that came with it. Again, Dahle self-healing cutting mat, the Vantage brand, and there's not a whole lot to know about it. It's just a piece of, might be hard to tell, but layered plastic or polypropylene, I'm not really sure. It's 5 layers in this sort of sandwich, and it's self-healing, eighth of an inch thick, 3 millimeters, and then it's printed for grid. Comes in a bunch of different sizes. I have it all the way up to the 36 by 48, which is great, and this is the 9 by 12. Just looking at it right now, you can see there's one printed side, and here you can see a 1/2 inch grid, but also 60, 45 degree angles. Here's a 90-degree angles, and there's millimeter measurements and centimeters and inches. So you kind of get everything you need on there, which is really great. Flip side, some of them are printed. This one's not printed on the flip side. Again, and the material is just a sandwich of that PVC. And what happens is that the inside of the sandwich is under pressure. So when you do cut it, it sort of pushes out on the outer layer, and that is the self-healing quality. It doesn't actually heal. And we'll get into that in a second. I just wanted to go through the basics, which I think we pretty much have done. The thing to really note is that it's not that hard. You couldn't scratch it with your fingernail, but there's a little bit of grip to it, so it's good for cutting upon. It will pick up a stain. This is ink. Something like a Sharpie or permanent marker, if you don't wash it up really quickly, it will absorb in there and stain, but they tend to look pretty clean, especially if you get this darker color. This one stayed really nicely for years. It is starting to lose a little bit of texture in some areas, but nothing major. And some have more texture than others, and again, it just depends on what brand you get, what color you get. Most of them are green or blue. This one is black, obviously. I will say that the edges are quite sharp, not like cut you, but it'd be uncomfortable to keep your hand or finger against it. So I've had to shave down a few edges if you are going to use it as a desk mat. And lastly, I just wanted to look at the self-healing properties. So I made some test marks on this. And up in this area, I made scratches, kind of what would happen from a key. Here on these horizontal lines, I did a light scratch, a medium scratch, and a deep scratch. I did those with an x-acto knife, sorry. So you can see that's quite sharp. And you can't see the self-healing here, but I will say I made a quite deep mark. And what it does is it sort of compresses itself in, so you have less of a gouge and more of a flat surface. It's never gonna look perfect, but there's no real gouge there. So again, aesthetically, it's not great. But if you were to roll over this, if you were cutting with a rolling knife or a x-acto knife or something like that, it's not really gonna interrupt your flow so much. And again, I could definitely feel this, but it doesn't feel as bad as it would if I were cutting into a wood surface or a heavy paper. And the deep and the medium are still there. The medium is like, you could feel it, but not much. And what's interesting is you could really feel it where the plastic goes above the surface, where it lifted out, either from the pushing or from the action of the blade. So what you could do now is you could shave this down and get to a pretty even surface. And then at the light cut right there, right, hits the 7, that is, you almost cannot feel that. So that's when the self-healing really works well. And then as for the little scrapes, those you could feel because they sort of lifted off more than they compressed in. But if you hit that with a very light sandpaper, or again, you shaved it down with an X-acto knife or something, it would be back to normal. So yeah, that is the Vantage self-healing cutting mat. These things are just totally cool, really nice to have, whether you use it under a larger application or just kind of place it down, do your cutting or do your drawing. And I just use it sometimes just to like catch ink so the ink doesn't get on a nicer table or something like that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of these, highly recommended. I don't know that the brands really matter so much from one to the next. I've had good luck with these Vantages, but again, I really do think they're all the same as long as you go with one of the top 3 or 4 vendors. Thanks for watching.